The vampire, a creature of darkness and dread. Its legend, born in the ancient lands of Eastern Europe, traveled across oceans and continents, eventually finding a foothold in the New World. This sinister folklore, carried by the tides of immigration, would weave itself into the fabric of American history, leaving an indelible mark on its culture and consciousness. It is a tale as old as time itself. The battle between good and evil, light and darkness, played out in the hearts and minds of those who believed. The seeds of vampire lore were sown in America with the arrival of European immigrants, particularly those from regions where such beliefs were deeply ingrained. German settlers, carrying with them tales of the vampire, a type of undead creature that consumed its own shroud and drained the life force of family members, brought a chilling new dimension to the folklore of their adopted land. These stories, often shared in hushed tones around flickering candlelight, painted a vivid and terrifying picture of the undead. The vast wilderness, with its lurking dangers and unknown terrors, provided a fitting backdrop for stories of supernatural beings. In this environment, where the line between the natural and the supernatural was often blurred, the vampire myth took root and flourished. The arrival of Hessian mercenaries during the American Revolution further fueled the flames of vampire lore. These German soldiers, steeped in the folklore of their homeland, brought with them their own unique beliefs and practices surrounding the undead. Their presence during a time of widespread death and disease only served to solidify the vampire's place in the American imagination. In today's episode, we look into the chilling tale of a vampire scare that gripped the town of Exeter, Rhode Island, the story of Mercy Brown, and the New England vampire panic. New England, with its puritanical roots and deep-seated fear of the unknown, proved particularly susceptible to the allure of vampire lore. The region's history was already steeped in tales of witchcraft and the supernatural, most notably the Salem witch trials, which cast a long shadow over the collective psyche of its inhabitants. Against this backdrop of fear and suspicion, vampire superstitions took hold with alarming speed. The close-knit communities of New England, bound together by shared beliefs and a strong sense of tradition, provided fertile ground for the spread of these tales. Stories of the undead, passed down through generations, became deeply ingrained in the local folklore, shaping the way people interpreted the world around them. The harsh realities of 19th-century life in rural New England only served to amplify these fears. Disease, particularly consumption or tuberculosis, ravaged families and communities. The slow, wasting death caused by this illness, coupled with the often limited understanding of its causes, led many to attribute its devastating effects to supernatural forces. The symptoms of consumption, with its pallor, wasting, and coughing of blood, were often seen as signs of vampirism. The belief that vampires preyed on their own family members further fueled suspicions, as families struck by the disease often saw multiple members succumb to its grip. The fear of vampires, much like the fear of witches that gripped Salem centuries earlier, led to a climate of suspicion and paranoia. Neighbors turned on neighbors, accusing one another of consorting with the undead. Any deviation from the norm, be it an unusual illness, a run of bad luck, or even an eccentric personality, could arouse suspicion and mark an individual as a potential vampire. The social fabric of these tight-knit communities began to fray under the weight of these accusations. Old grudges resurfaced, fueled by fear and mistrust. Rumors like wildfire spread through towns and villages, fanning the flames of fear. The mere whisper of the word vampire was enough to send shivers down spines and cast a pall over entire communities. People lived in a constant state of dread, haunted by the possibility that a loved one, a neighbor, or even they themselves might be harboring a dark secret. As fear of the undead gripped New England, a morbid set of rituals and practices emerged, aimed at identifying and thwarting these suspected creatures of the night. These rituals, often rooted in a blend of folklore and superstition, reflected the very real terror that vampires inspired. Suspicions often fell upon those who had recently died, particularly if they had displayed unusual symptoms before death, or if their corpses showed signs of decomposition deemed unnatural. The exhumation of graves became a chillingly common practice, as communities sought to confirm their suspicions and put their fears to rest. Once a suspected vampire was unearthed, a number of gruesome rituals might be performed. Driving a stake through the heart of the deceased was a common practice, believed to pin the vampire to the earth and prevent it from rising again. Other methods included decapitation, burning the heart, and stuffing the mouth with garlic or other substances believed to ward off evil. The villagers of Exeter, Rhode Island, knew that Farmer George Brown had a problem. First, in 1883, his wife, Mary Brown, succumbed to a mysterious illness. 6 months later, his 20-year-old daughter, Mary Olive Brown, also fell ill and died. Within the next several years, his 19-year-old daughter, Mercy Brown, was also dead, and George's teenage son, Edwin Brown, a healthy lad who worked as a store clerk, became suddenly frail and sick. The village doctor informed George that consumption was taking his family. But the country folk of Exeter had another explanation. On a chilly March afternoon in 1892, a group of men entered Exeter's Chestnut Hill Cemetery. Then they began to exhume the bodies of George Brown's wife and 2 daughters. They had concluded that one of the deceased was leaving the grave at night to suck the life out of its relatives. Only by killing the vampire could young Edwin be saved. First, the men examined the bodies of Mrs. Brown and daughter Mary. Finding them to be properly decomposed, they began to exhume Mercy Brown. Slowly they shoveled into Mercy's grave. When they reached the corpse, they suddenly stepped back in terror. Mercy, who had been buried for more than 2 months, appeared oddly well preserved. It seemed that her hair and nails had grown, and when the men cautiously prodded the corpse with their shovel, they found that it was filled with fresh blood. The suspected vampire's heart was removed and burned on a nearby rock. The ashes were added to young Edwin's medicine. Still, the boy died less than 2 months later. To the less superstitious, there was perhaps nothing so unusual about the well-preserved condition of Mercy's body. She had been in the ground during the 2 coldest months of the year. The mysterious wave of illnesses that swept George Brown's family was probably tuberculosis. But that did not keep Rhode Island from becoming known as the vampire capital of America, South County, whose isolated villages resembled the lonely hamlets of Transylvania. The legends persist to this day. In Rhode Island Historical Cemetery, No. 2 stands the gravestone of alleged vampire Nellie L. Vaughn of West Greenwich, who died in 1889 at the age of 19. The grave is supposedly cursed. One local university professor who studied vampirism claimed that no vegetation or lichen would grow on Nellie's grave, despite numerous attempts to plant there, and people are still taken aback by the inscription along the bottom of Nellie's tombstone. The curious words read, "I am waiting and watching for you." In many ways, the vampire panic of New England mirrors the fears and uncertainties of its time, a period marked by disease, death, and the unknown. It serves as a powerful example of how human beings seek to understand and control the forces that threaten their existence, even if it means resorting to the supernatural. So, the next time you find yourself wandering through an old New England cemetery, remember, the whispers of the past are never far away, and the shadows of history linger long after the sun has set. This concludes today's episode of the Paranormal Report. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to our channel. It is due to your continued viewership and support that we are able to bring you interesting and informative videos like this. The team here at the Paranormal Report really appreciates your support.